Great. So, hi, Heather. Lovely to see you, Dr. Heather. And yeah, thanks for taking the time to speak to me today in our series of lives that we're doing with all of our amazing experts. So I guess for anyone who doesn't know you, who doesn't know what you do, it'd be really great if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, perhaps telling us what you do, how you got into it, and why you do it.
Yeah. How long have you got, Ruth? No, so I am Heather McKee, or Dr. Heather McKee. I am a behavior change specialist. So that means that I love motivation and love understanding why we do what we do. And essentially, I help people and organizations create sticky habits. And I'm sure we'll talk about what that means in a second. How I got into my line of work, that's, a bit of a squiggly line, definitely not a straight line. I started out in academia, so I spent a long time in university studying, what helps motivate people to change health behaviors and ultimately what helps them engage with those long term. So I'm kind of obsessed with not just how we take up habits, but ultimately how we create those long-standing habits, and what are the factors and the skills that certain people can build into their lives to be able to support those.
Amazing. Yeah. And I love the work that you do. Every time I read a post of yours or see a live that you've done, I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible, because it's so practical what you share. And I feel like I pick up tips every time I read a post or listen to you. So yeah, everyone should go and follow you for sure. And you mentioned there sticky habits. So
Yeah.
is this a term that you've coined, or is it something that's kind of wider known in behavior change world? And what does it mean?
A great question. So I haven't actually coined or copyrighted it, which is a good idea. It's
Yeah.
a term I use to describe um, change. And I think I've kind of come across it, or I've kind of come up with it in a way based on psychological theory that underpins motivation. And what I mean by that is, for me, sticky habits are based in or embedded in intrinsic motivation. And basically what that is understanding why creating a habit is important to you, kind of beyond the number on the scales or beyond your paycheck or getting letters after your name or a time in the race or those kind of inner carrots and sticks, like feeling guilty or wanting to please someone, or doing it because it's something you feel you should do. That's not sticky motivation. That's what I call slippy motivation, actually. And it's known as extrinsic motivation in psychology. And like when people are stuck or they've lost the motivation to change, it's often because they've lost touch with the reason why they want to change in the first place. Or as I like to call it, that stickiness, that why. Why are they doing it? And they often get stuck because they feel like they should do things rather than they want to. And behavioral science has shown that those are connected with their why behind their habits, and known as intrinsic motivation, or as I like to call it, sticky motivation. That's the type of motivation that creates lasting change. And so I created over time, I probably based on my own kind of 15 years in research, and then based on pulling from the latest in the academic field, I've kind of created this methodology, which is six-step methodology, which is based on the word habits, and it goes through all of those key elements that ultimately make up that those sticky habits, those habits that last. So I mean sticky in a good way, not in a you go to grab your 2-year-old's hand and it's sticky, not in a dodgy way, but in a positive way. So there's habits that stick around and actually go on to support us with the things that matter most to us in our lives.
Yeah, no, I love that. Sticky and slippy habits. Definitely trademark those too.
Noted.
I think a phrase that I think you use, correct me if I'm wrong, is if you find your why, you find your how. Is that something that you say? I think that's something I remember hearing in some of your sessions. Oh, we've just frozen. Hopefully you're still there, Heather. Oh, are you back? I think you're back, but I've lost your sound now.
You got me?
Oh, I've got you now. Yes, kind of. Oh no, you're frozen again. Let's see if this is going to continue. Oh no, I've lost you. Oh, boo. Oh, I can see you moving, but I can't hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, you're back. Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, you keep freezing, but let's carry on and then we can hopefully clip it.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, that's all right. So I don't know if you heard, did you hear my question? I was saying something that I think I've picked up from your sessions is if you find your why, you find your how. Is that something that you say?
If you find your why, you find your way. Yeah.
Way, that's it. Yeah, which I think is a great phrase. And how for someone who's okay, yeah, that makes total sense. How do I find my why? Is it about looking at core values? And if so, what does that mean? How would I, as someone who doesn't know what my core values are, perhaps think about how to find that why?
Yeah. And it's a great question. And there's different levels of why. Let's say you're thinking about creating a fitness habit. And so instead of your goal or your outcome being, to get 10,000 steps on your fitness tracker, start asking yourself, well, why is that important to me? Okay, well, I want to get fitter. Well, why is that important to me? Well, I want to feel more confident and competent, or I want to have more focus in work, or I want to feel like I've got energy to play with my kids at the end of the day. And you can start to see if you just keep asking yourself why often enough, rather than just focusing on a particular outcome, focusing on a particular goal. And goals are meaningful and they're useful to have targets to work towards. But in the day to day, we really need to understand what the connection is with that goal. What does it contribute to our lives every single day? And that can make it much more easy then to engage, because if we can understand the contribution something makes, it becomes so much bigger than 10,000 steps on our fitness tracker. It becomes playing with your children, having more confidence, having more focus, being able to live into your potential better, feeling like you're making the most of this one life you've been given. You can get really, really deep with it. But if you just, I say, we often need at least 5 whys to get to our true intrinsic why. And that can really just help us understand, is this something that I'm doing for me, or is it something I'm doing for someone else? And maybe if you are doing it for someone else, maybe that's not the right goal for you right now. And actually you can just step back and reevaluate and have a look at what's more meaningful for me right now. And you can even use this in tiny ways. Like I often use it if I feel a bit disengaged with tasks. So say I'm doing like some data in a spreadsheet, or I'm doing my taxes or something, I can ask myself, why is it important for me to do this? And ultimately it's so I can feel more confident in my business, or I can help support a client with their goals. And if I can, ask myself about what the contribution is, it makes me less resentful and more likely to actually engage. And that's what I mean about the stickiness and the importance of intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, love that. And how do we then take that into employee well-being? And one of the things that we talk about a lot, and something we work on in our audit as well, is trying to get that long-lasting engagement, and not having a quick fix, and people being motivated to come to a webinar, but then where does that go? We're losing that motivation, or in the first place, perhaps as a business, you're struggling to get engagement within wellbeing initiatives or within that wellbeing program. So how can we take that idea of sticky habits and intrinsic motivation into an employee wellbeing program to get that engagement?
Yeah,
That's
great question.
I know.
Like from a behavioral point of view, I think the problem is that we're so focused on the ingredients of change. So we're so focused on the well-being days, the ping pong tables, the fruit bowls, all of these ingredients. And while ingredients are useful, I often say, how many of us don't know that we need to eat more vegetables, or sleep more, or manage our stress better? It's not an information gap, it's an implementation gap. We often know what we need to do, and we feel motivated often to do it, but it's actually taking those ingredients and putting them into place in the complexity of our lives that we kind of falter. It's turning those intentions that we have around, meditating, managing our stress, sleeping better, moving more, and turning them into actions. where we fall down. And ultimately, I feel like, we need to focus on implementation, not information. And so we need to focus on skill building within organizations. And how do we do that in a way that aligns with sticky habits or aligns with intrinsic motivation? Which I think there's a lot of, I see there's a lot of lack of co-creation within organizations, those types of programs that have poor employee uptake, it's because their purpose obviously isn't, it's not often aligned with what's most important to their employees. And so, like, prior to delivering any sort of wellbeing program, the questions you need to kind of ask yourself are, how does your wellbeing program reflect and embed the values of your organization? Like the rationale, what's your why for doing what you're doing? And how does that reflect what's valuable to your employees? What's their why? They, one thing that might be impacting, you might think, okay, running fitness sessions is what we need, or because everyone's doing it, or yoga, lunchtime yoga. And actually what might be most valuable for your employees is parenting strategies, or, better sleep skills. And so it's really important to understand what's valuable to your employees. And in order to get them on board with your program, help them understand how it contributes to their life as as an employee, but also their life outside of that. I think it's really important just to not just put well-being on top of people. That's slippy motivation. If we're telling people they have to do certain things in order to be well, that's not going to engage them. Find out what they love, what are their goals. It might not be that they want a new desk. They might they might want parenting support. And then another thing that I feel like, we've talked about this before, right? But we feel that we see organizations miss is that they don't check in on the process of their wellbeing programs either. They're just very focused on the outcomes or getting things done, rather than, does this time of day work best for my webinar? Are we having follow-up accountability within the organization? So we're getting the most from having this specialist come speak to us. Are we doing implementation clinics? Are our comms aligned with our values as an organization and the values that we hold for well-being? Do we allow people to opt out and rejoin? Not everyone has to participate necessarily for it to be success. Are our leaders role modeling those behaviors? How is our team communicating the sense of urgency and their vision for well-being in the organization? And then things like, as a behavioral scientist, I'd be obsessed with which things are like reducing friction. How do we make it easy for people to engage? How do we make it fun? How do we source ideas and examples from our team members? How do we role model behaviors? How do we listen? How do we iterate? How do we adapt our wellbeing program? And I think that's something that you're really good at and Elevate, to listen to your partners and to listen to the organization, so the people behind the organization, so you can adapt them, because we're never going to get it right first time. And we have to make sure that it's fit for purpose. And, humans, we're free range humans. We don't do rational things. We know things are good for us. We know things are good to do, but we don't always behave rationally. And I think having an adaptable program that's really embedded in the values of the organization, but really aligned with the values of the employees, is going to be a key element in terms of creating those engaging programs.
100%. And it has to be flexible, doesn't it? Because we're not in control of so much that's going on. Take COVID, for example. You could have scheduled a 12-month wellbeing plan, and then suddenly the whole world has changed. Our needs and our support needs have changed. The delivery format has to change. There are so many different elements. And also, I think sometimes just the way that we receive information can change from week to week. So some weeks we might want to have a face-to-face interactive session. Other weeks, if it's a really busy time of year for the workplace, webinar that's perhaps pre-recorded might be the better option. So I think it's really hard to kind of forecast what all of those different elements that are contributing to engagement are going to be 12 months or 24 months ahead, which is why it really has to be flexible. And like you said, we have to, that's the first point of call, we have to find out what people really want and what people really need. It's those two elements that are so key. And often
what you said there, Ruth, is really important, is in meeting people where they're at as well. Like, people learn and consume in different ways. Some people might want a soundbite, some people might want a video, some people might want to show up live, they like that accountability, some people might like that kind of water cooler conversation and breakdown of things. And so if we can design wellbeing programs to tap into different types of modalities as well, and learn within our organizations what modalities work well, that's a huge part of the process of evaluation and understanding what works.
Definitely. And something that we do with our audit with you as well, Heather, is looking at what some of those barriers are. So looking at, it's a big element of behaviour change, isn't it? Looking at, okay, what are the things that might come along that are going to prevent us from reaching that long-term habit? So it may be in an organisation, it may be a time thing, it may be a budget thing, it may be a motivation thing. So first of all, setting out, okay, what are all of those barriers and how can we overcome them? And I think that's something that's often missed.
Yeah, definitely. I think all too often we're too quick to jump to the solution rather than actually look at the drivers of the behaviors. Again, everything that we do, good habits, bad habits, everything's driven from a basic human need. And if we can understand what those basic needs are within our employees and within our colleagues, we can better actually address them rather than, spend a lot of time and a lot of money investing in programs that aren't necessarily going to bring us that return on investment. So we need to look at those initial behavioral drivers. What are those barriers, but also as well the enablers? What's working? What are people enjoying? What's gaining interest from people? And I think a big part of that as well is once we understand those barriers and enablers more, that we don't just focus on knowledge, that we focus on skills and confidence too. And I often say, it's skill power, not willpower, that creates long-term change. And, so often we've, used to, and Ruth, you lament this too, companies often are far too focused on well-being perks. And perks are often, really have really poor engagement. And that's because they often don't focus on skills. So they don't feel it's worthwhile for individuals. Like leadership skills, people skills, empathy skills, I would say behavior change skills, knowing how to change rather than just the things that you need to change. Things like autonomy in your job, feeling valued, having access to flexible working, chances to learn and grow and support your other colleagues. Like no amount of kind of fruit bowls or meditation class are going to compensate for that. And I think it's really important then. And then that's what I really enjoy about doing a wellbeing audit with an organization at the start is, okay, well, let's get this right from the start. Let's really understand those barriers and enablers so we don't have to continue doing work that we don't necessarily know works or not and isn't actually tackling maybe the main issues that we're seeing in our organization. So let's go back to basics. Let's really understand what's stopping people engaging so we can design and build programs that are bespoke to our people and can really understand those levers that are going to get them to maintain change, but maintain change in a light touch, a fun and engaging way, rather than a way that isn't going to, I suppose, ultimately get people engaged in the process. Can we get people to do it in a fun, in a light way and really actually enjoy the wellbeing program as opposed to feeling like it's just another thing that they should do at their organization?
Definitely. Yeah. And that actually brings me on nicely to something I'd love to very briefly in the last few minutes talk to you about. And it's something that I noticed that you were talking about on LinkedIn, which was the theory around the, I think you called it the 4 burners theory. Is it the 4 burners?
Yeah.
Where I think if I understand correctly, you were saying, with willpower and motivation, it's kind of a limited resource. And I think often when we're on the start of maybe changing a behavior or maybe trying to change lots of behaviors, perhaps, we're so enthused and so motivated, we think, right, I'm going to start a diet this week. I'm going to go to the gym every day. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to get up at 6 a.m. I'm going to be really productive at work. And then what happens is quite quickly we use up that willpower, we use up that motivation, and then it kind of all goes out the window and suddenly we've lost all motivation. Whereas I think if I'm correct, you were saying actually think about it with like 4. Anyway, you explain, you'll be much better at it.
No, I was really enjoying this, Ruth. I was really enjoying your explanation. And I think you absolutely nailed it. I think, but even before I talk about 4 burners, it's kind of like a myth that we have is that big goals lead to big changes. New Year comes around and we throw everything in the kitchen sink at it. We set a goal, we become really motivated, we promise to go to the gym every day, or cut down on sugar, or meditate twice a day, or save money, or be nice to our other half, and the list goes on. And the thing is, pursuing all these goals at once, it tends to put us under unnecessary pressure to do them perfectly. And then we get this all or nothing mindset. Well, if we can't do it perfectly, why should we do it at all? And essentially, it uses up our willpower. Willpower is like, sand through an hourglass, or, the more we use it, our like time, it just disappears over time. And so, and we rely far too much on our willpower, whereas actually what we need to rely on is our skill power. And one really important skill is learning to understand how to prioritize things in your life, and understanding and having the self-awareness to know what is a priority for you at the moment. And often, like you say, we're spinning all our wheels trying to achieve lots of things all at once. And that's what the four burners theory explains this. And I didn't come up with this, by the way, so can't copyright this one. Like there's 4 rings on a hob, and you've got your friends and family, you've got your health, you've got your career, you've got your friends, you've got your family, you've got your career, and you've got your health. And in order to kind of be particularly successful at one, you can't really have the 4 burners on the go all at once. You've got to kind of cut off at least one, if not 2. And for some people, this can be incredibly frustrating, but for others, it can be incredibly liberating, because our life isn't static. We go through periods of life where family is really important. Actually, we have to turn that health burner down a little bit, or maybe career is really important, and so we have to turn down that friends burner way down. Yeah. And so there's different times in our lives that there's different priorities. But what's really important for people to really do and understand is, well, what part of my life am I in right now? Is this a career phase? Okay, if this is a career phase, what are other things that are important to me right now? Maybe it's a career phase and health is still a really important value, but you've got to turn down your friends, you've got to turn down your family burner. And what I say is, I say this with a point of view of, 1, prioritization, but 2 as well, understanding that it doesn't have to be, just because you turn one down doesn't have to be that it doesn't exist. It might be that you look at your friendships on a scale of 1 to 10, which 10 might be meeting 3 friends a week for lunch, whereas what's a 5? Is a 5 just having 1 phone call a week with a friend? And maybe all the way back to a 1 is just reaching out to tell someone that you're thinking of them. It's the same with fitness. We always think, okay, if I'm not going to the gym 3 times a week, what's the point at all? But fitness comes in so many different forms. Fitness can be going for a 15-minute walk at lunch. It could be lifting some kettlebells while you're waiting for the kettle to boil. It doesn't have to be 100% all the time. And so what I often say to people is, decide on what your priorities are right now, and then scale everything back. And then you can scale it up and down. And you can even do this yourself. Like, what does family look like on a scale of 1 to 10? What does friendship look like on a scale of 1 to 10? What does career look like on a scale of 1 to 10? What does health look like for you on a scale of 1 to 10? And then you can decide how to allocate your resources based on how much time, how much energy you have at a given time. Because life is never static. It's never going to all work perfectly. There's going to be urgency. There's going to be things that are changing. And at least okay, well, I don't have time or energy or resources right now to do a 10 out of 10, but I've got 9 other options available to me right now in a way to serve that goal or serve that value that matters to me. And which of these might work well with the time and the situation that I'm in. And so you're still getting to follow things, but you're not just putting yourself in that unnecessary pressure and using up your willpower to try and force everything into your life. You're working on your priorities and you're scaling everything up and down as your time and resources allow.
Definitely. And that's so important, isn't it? To remember that it doesn't mean that you're neglecting one area. It just means that you're not putting 10 out of 10 focus on all 4 areas, which we know is not a recipe for sustained.
We're humans, we're not robots. We can't do that. When are we going to just admit that we can't do it all? We just can't.
Exactly. And also, I don't think it's a case of you having to tell people that, okay, well, I'm scaling back on friends this month. It's just a mindset, isn't it? It's almost kind of okay, it's okay for me not to be going full blast on every single area of my life. It's kind of permission, giving yourself permission.
Self-compassion.
Yeah. Exactly. exactly. Oh, well, we've been speaking for a while, Heather, and you know, we could carry on chatting for a long time about this, but we should probably wrap up. But thank you so much again. I always just gain a lot of insight from our chats. So yeah, and if anyone's interested in finding out more about the way that we work together at Elevate and the audit that we've mentioned, and also your brilliant habit webinars, workshops, any other sessions, then please do get in touch with myself at Elevate. And yeah, hopefully we can chat again soon.
Good luck with that, Ruth. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Heather.